I want to say something, a few words about something that I noticed when reading a book called History on Trial. It's a book about a certain Jewish woman who happened to be a historian who was judged in England by a Holocaust denier named David Irving. Now you have to know that in general, very few people buy the ideas of Holocaust deniers. Very few. There are more people out there who believe in conspiracy theories about September 11th than those who believe there was no Holocaust. So it's actually extremely unpopular idea to be a Holocaust denier. But there is this, historian who is not actually a Holocaust historian. He calls himself a Hitler historian, and he tries to whitewash Hitler. And among other things, he, of course, as part of the process, he denied Holocaust. And his name is, I'm not sure he's still alive, is David Irving. And when this lady in her book somewhere, maybe in a footnote, mentioned that he's a Holocaust denier, he called her to judgment, he called her to court in England for assassination of character, or whatever it is, for basically lying against him. And what it came down to is proving did Holocaust happen or not in court. And the burden of proof was on her. That's how the British law works. If you say something about someone that's a defamation of sorts, you have to prove that you're right. Otherwise, he could get money from you for defamation. So in the end, she won. But the point I'm going to make is only one little part in her book that I particularly thought was interesting. I didn't think that, by the way, the book is that interesting. And I do believe that the reason there are so few Holocaust deniers and there's so much study about Holocaust, let's say, in American colleges, one of the reasons it has nothing to do with Jews, in my opinion. It has to do with the fact that there were two extremely evil people fighting each other, Stalin and Hitler. Both were extremely evil. And America joined the war on the side of Stalin against Hitler. But the question is, a lot of times we ask ourselves, Americans ask ourselves, was it really the correct thing to do? Why was Hitler so much worse than Stalin? Stalin killed millions of his people, maybe more than Hitler. So there are different estimates, but it's tens of millions for sure that he killed. And a lot of the former concentration camps became, in the Eastern Europe at least, became later part of the set of Gulag. And many of the people who survived the war actually were killed by Stalin. There was, for instance, a group called Belsky brothers who fought as partisans against Germans, and later one of them was shot by the Russians. So the point is that why would America enter on the side of the Soviet Union? Only Holocaust makes it, kind of tips the scale, makes it clear that Hitler was worse. If not for Holocaust, Hitler and Stalin are approximately equally evil. It's the Holocaust that makes the big difference. And for America to feel good about its entering of into World War II, which of course I believe was a great thing that they entered, who knows how many of us Jews would have survived if America did not enter. Very few Jews in Europe survived already, but it could have been that there would be even greater destruction. So we're very thankful for Americans for liberating all these concentration camps. And if, by the way, Soviet Union would have won against Germany even without Americans, that would actually make things not necessarily better for the Jews, because who knows what Stalin would have done to the Jews. At least he was planning at some point to send all the Jews to Siberia, to places where they would very unlikely survive. And in the end, he died on Purim, or around Purim, and never had a chance to implement his awful plan. So the point is that we're generally very thankful to Americans. And certainly the Holocaust survivors are extremely thankful to Americans. But I'm trying to say that Americans also have a good reason to study Holocaust and to not want this to be forgotten, because then their choice of fighting on the side of Soviet Union kind of makes more sense. At any rate, in that book, the lady that wrote it, her last name is Lipstadt, Deborah Lipstadt. So she writes a very interesting part of the story. They had to hire a very accepted British historian to analyze the books of this David Irving. And her point was that this guy is not a historian at all. This David Irving, the Holocaust denier, is not a historian at all. He's just a politician of sorts. He's doing propaganda. He's not doing history. And this accepted historian that they hired, who had to go through his books and very carefully analyzed what he wrote, he dismissed the idea out of hand. He said, how could you call this guy not a historian? He's a historian. He may have an opinion that's not the majority opinion, not the most accepted opinion, but his opinion also counts. It's not like he's not a historian at all. He wrote so many history books. Only after analyzing the books of David Irving for a long time, very carefully, checking and rechecking the facts, did he agree with Deborah that this guy is not a historian at all. He's not just an opinion that's unusual but has a right to exist. He's not a historian. He's just doing propaganda. So what do I learn from this? I learned from this it's very hard to know the truth in this world. Our sages, the sages of Talmud, tell us that this world is the world of Sheker. It's the world of basically lies. Everything is very hard to know where the truth lies. And sorry for the pun. The point is that if a person of that caliber, who was a great historian, I think in Cambridge maybe, I forgot exactly where he worked, and he needed to analyze for a long time somebody's writings to conclude that this guy is a liar rather than a historian. So what should an average person do? How would we know anything about anything? How do we make decisions? We're biased and we hear all kinds of information all around. You know, there are some people who say there's global warming and others say there's no such thing. And there are scientists on both sides, and maybe the majority of scientists hold a certain way. But again, who do you count as majority, and who are the scientists who are actually qualified to make that decision? And that's true about most things. Torah codes, for instance, is a good example. When Torah codes came out, there were people on both sides, including Orthodox Jews on both sides. Some who were big proponents, who were convinced that there is such a phenomenon as Torah codes, and others who said that this whole thing is nonsense. And like I said, this is not necessarily a split between Orthodox Jews who presumably would want to believe in Torah codes and those who are against the Torah, or those who are atheists or whatever, and they of course would presumably want to believe that there is no such thing as Torah codes and such thing couldn't possibly be there. But that's not the case. We find Orthodox Jews, including great scientists, who were against the Torah codes. In fact, the organizer of the movement, one of the big organizers, is a great physicist who lives in California, Barry Simon. So the point is that anything in this world, even specialists a lot of times argue about it. And how much more so non-specialists? How do they expect me to make a decision or know whether global warming is a real potential problem or not? I mean, who's going to make the decision? Al Gore? Well, Al Gore is not a scientist at all. He has his own thing to promote. Well, he got Nobel Prize for it too. The point is that even if something like Holocaust denial, which like I said is extremely unpopular, and still a guy who does it is considered a historian until a person who's truly a great historian will analyze very, very carefully, and then he could conclude whether this guy is a historian or not. But outright, he's not going to dismiss the ideas of David Irving as definitely false. He'll just consider them as a kind of unusual or not mainstream, but still they have the right to exist. Only if you analyze his works and you see that he's lying, then you could say that he's just an imposer, he's just doing propaganda, he's not a real historian. So even if it's true about something like Holocaust denial, which, like I said, most people dismiss the whole idea right away, how much more so on things that are not obvious at all, like predicting what will happen with regards to the climate change, or that's how life is. Unfortunately or fortunately, this is the world we're in. You know, we're in this together. We all try to find out the truth, but most of us just hear all kinds of ideas and different opinions, and mostly in these types of disputes, the ones who win are not the ones who have the truth, but the ones who have better mouths, the ones who know how to talk better. That's how most of these disputes are won or lost. It's people who know how to do commercials, basically. Al Gore is good in one thing, in promoting himself or promoting whatever idea he wants to promote at this time. He's not a specialist in anything, he's not a scientist, but he can do commercials, and that's what he does. And somebody else will do that for Holocaust denial, much less successfully, but with some success in certain areas of the world. I mean, let's say in Muslim countries, there's so much propaganda that the majority of people are Holocaust deniers to a large extent. So the point is that, to, I guess, conclude this video, the world is the world of lies, and we have to make the best out of this world that whatever we could do, but that's how it is.